drew a circle to shut me out, a heretic, a rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had to wit the wind. We drew a circle and took them in.
Let's go ahead. I invite you to rise and body your spirit. This is a hymn we've been doing all month to get some energy in the room. I invite you to sing along.
Surrounded by midnight, surrounded by midnight, surrounded by midnight. The sun's gonna warm my face, 'cause I wanna be ready. I wanna be ready. I wanna be ready when joy comes back to me.
So welcome to the Unitarian Church. My name is Nathan. I'm one of your ministers. I'm pleased to welcome you today. Today is a special day. We're going to go into that in a little bit. But a few of the logistical pieces we want you to know about. If you are a visitor, we are very glad that you are here. If you are interested in joining, either in person or online, if you're interested in knowing more about joining the church, come talk to me after the service. I'd love to give you some answers. Or pretend to give you answers. All right, here we go. A lot of stuff going on. Remember, worship is for all ages. For those parents of little kids who need a break, we have childcare available for 5 and under. Then we have Sunday school, faith formation for all ages kind of this week. Between the services, we have Sunday school for children. We have a social justice team meeting. And we are not doing this week we are not doing the what it means to be UU because of a teacher shortage, not because we're not paying them well, because they're volunteers, but just because of a weird convoluence of circumstances. So we're asking if you are interested in anything, if you are a youth also, we're missing your teachers because they got sick. So youth through adults, we have a social justice team meeting that we're encouraging all of you to go to. Coming up on the 29th from 5 to 7 will be our annual Halloween party. We still need volunteers for that. There will be a sign-up sheet out there if you would like to sign up for that. Just some things for you to note. On November 12th, we will have a gumbo cook-off and like an open mic kind of situation. And then on November 19th, we're bringing in a special guest for a program we're calling Songs on Being Human, Empathy, Ethics, and Helping Relationships. Got a lot going on in this church. It's also stewardship time. So one of the things that we did is I solicited some testimonials from some church members. Some did them on video, some did them in person. When some heard what was done in person, they wanted to now do it in person rather than the video. Some wanted to stay on video. So today we have a reflection from a member of this church. This will be a video of Julie Richard. So we'll hear from Julie and then we'll invite Donna up.
My name is Julie Richard, and I have been a member of the church since 2006. I've been active in the choir and religious education, OWL, many different aspects of the church. Why I give to the church? I give because it's a home for me. It's a spiritual home, it's a community, it's a family. It's something that I feel is important, not just to me, but to the community. And I want to make sure we're around. I want to make sure we're here. Not just for me, but other people coming in and people outside of our doors. And we don't live in a Star Trek world where nobody uses money. Money is necessary. And that's just life. That's what is needed. I would lose a lot if this church closed because we just couldn't keep it open. You're gonna make me cry here. I would lose my family. I would lose the connections of the people who have been such an important part of my life in these last 16 years. Even when I boomeranged, I moved away and I came back. Everybody was already here. Everybody was here for me no matter what. And I would hate to lose that. When there was a medical emergency in my family, I had people calling me. I had people checking in on me, asking me what could they do, what I needed, even if it was just, hey, I'm just on the phone, just talk. Or it was, do you need someone to feed your cat? Little things that made a huge difference in my ability to have the strength to go through all of that, because it was hard. And just the fact that they were there, I didn't even call anyone, I don't think. But they reached out to me. This church reached out to me when I needed it, even if I didn't think I did.
Let's give Julie a big hand for that touching testimony. First, I want to say thank you. Thank you to every one of you who has already turned in your 2023 pledge. You know who you are, and we really are grateful. I'm Donna Yelverton, and I am the chair of the Generosity Team. And I want to give you a short update on the pledge drive this morning. I've already told you many of the reasons why I pledge. That this church saw me through the deaths of my husband and my mom. That you helped me finally deal with the stillbirth of my daughter over 50 years ago. That you've given me volunteer opportunities in governance and ministry far beyond the wildest imagination of a girl raised in a fundamentalist church where only white men could be leaders. And that you've provided a beloved community that is family to me. So I will just add that I pledge because I want everyone, now and in the future, to have the opportunities you've given me. And selfishly, I want to be able to think of myself as a person with a generous spirit. So, on to the status report. And it's mostly good news this morning. We Unitarians have a reputation for not wanting to follow directions. But thanks to you folks who have heeded our plea to pledge early, we're making good progress. 83 households have responded, of which more than half were either new pledgers or they increased their pledges. We're now almost 40% of the way to our $600,000 goal for next year's budget. For those of you who have yet to pledge, please do so today, or definitely by next week, so you'll be eligible for the drawing for the Marsha Ball concert tickets that the Generosity team has donated. I'll be at the table out in the breezeway after the service to receive your pledge cards or answer any questions that you might have. Our UUA consultant, Mark Ewert, told us that we have too many non-pledgers and that our budget is too dependent on a few high-end donors. Please help us become more financially healthy by pledging whatever you can afford to if you haven't pledged before, and by considering whether you're able to move your 2022 pledge up one level of Nathan's Lego chart for 2023. And here's a photo of the chart. The real thing is in the office, and it's definitely an engineering masterpiece. We'll also be updating it and putting photos in the Wednesday bulletin or Saturday email so that you can follow the progress that we make in moving us up to the next levels. Finally, we hope that you'll help us conclude the pledge drive this month. Then we can mark our calendars for our celebration of the first ever in the history of this church 1 month-long pledge drive. We'll do that on Saturday, November 12th from noon until 4. You can sign up for the gumbo cook-off being coordinated by Memoretsky, and you can see Joy Ferreira about entering your talent in the open mic show. I hope you'll plan to attend this free, fun family event. And pledge now to make yourself eligible to win the drawing that will also take place that day. Please join me and the other 82 households who have already pledged to help fund the next chapter of our church. Thank you all for your generosity.
Ed, I'm going to pull a twist on you. Can you put that photo back up? Is that possible? Just to let you all know what this is, if it's possible. Yeah, there it is. It is. I spent a lot of time sorting through Legos to find roughly similar colors. This church is lacking in all of. We do not have 58 blocks of any particular color, just so you know. The little white bars you see at the bottom are how many people have pledged within each of those distributions. Red is $0 to $500, and pink and purple is over $10,000. If we had, basically we need people in all of those distributions, so that's what that image is. And if you could turn it around, which Ed does not have a photo of, you can take it down. There's a bunch of masking tape holding it together. So you are welcome to go look at this piece of architectural wonder in the office, but please don't move it. I get an email from Allison every time we've moved it in any particular way, every time I've moved it in any particular way, warning me not to break it. So, today we have cards. We have cards for 3 church members who are recovering from an illness or a surgery or hospitalization of some kind. And those are, and all 3 of them, to the best that I can figure, are doing okay, considering. Those are Lois Ellisar, Kathleen Kreidler, and Leslie Todd. So we have cards for them. This ritual we have is open for everybody in this congregation. It actually has some tie-in with the peace stones out there, which we'll go into a little later. We invite those who wish to come forward either along the east or the west wall. Take a stone, let it represent whatever's on your heart, whatever's on your mind, whatever maybe you're going through, and place it in the chalice bowl. Maybe you're a little more at peace, a little more together. Whatever the work that you need to do or to lay down, we now invite those to come forward as we place stones. And we say together as we light the chalice, with hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love. One of the magics of you could lower this probably a little. One of the magics of this church is no one ever sits in the front row except for over here. But I never saw this. Have you ever seen this before? There's like a curvature, maybe one of us stinks, but there is a perfect curvature right now of people not sitting too close to the chancel. We tricked some of you because we put an extra front row in here so that you could actually sit in the front row. So when I originally conceptualized this service, I thought it would be called the We Church. The idea was that we were halfway through our stewardship drive, and this would be the Sunday that we would focus on our identity as a church, what we value, where we need to go, things like that. I pulled the idea from a title of a reading that our stewardship consultant gave me after the report he released a few months ago. So when he came in August to sort of get a state of the church and figure out what the generosity possibilities are for this church, he said that what he heard over and over in his interviews and conversations was I, things that I want, things that I need, things that I want this church to be, or I want for me in this church, and not a lot of what we want, or what we want for this church, or what this church should be for everyone, or for the larger community. And he brought up this article that I was originally going to reference, but you'll find out later why I'm not, about how in activist work especially, it's true that in civic life as well, when people feel threatened or worried, they stop thinking about the collective and they'll start thinking about their individual needs. Mark said he's seeing a lot of I churches right now, rather than a lot of we churches. And it makes sense. People are tired and worried and just want something familiar to hold on to. It's hard to think about a future and a vision when you're living crisis to crisis, or exhaustion to exhaustion, or paycheck to paycheck, or trauma to trauma. So I had planned to spend today exploring how we can broaden our view, to stop thinking about what each of us individually needs, and instead what this church could be here for all of us. And then I looked again at the calendar and I realized that tomorrow is the 30th anniversary of the killing of Yoshi Hattori. If you are unfamiliar with this story, we're going to retell it, but from a slightly different perspective. You will hear from Holly Haymaker on behalf of her and her husband, Dick. They have been members of this church for quite a few decades. They were, along with their children, Webb and Elizabeth, Yoshi's host family when he was killed. You will also hear from Steve Crump. Online people. There's people sitting here. I'm not like pointing off into nowhere. They're just not on camera. But you will also hear from Steve Crump. He is our minister emeritus, and this story happened during his 36 years of ministry in the church. Later, you will hear a letter from Yoshi's parents, read by a church member who has folded a crane every year on his birthday and placed it added it to a garland. That you didn't know I was going to say this. All right, well, that doesn't happen. Someone else does it. Anyway, but she does it, and she periodically visits Japan, and in some ways helps keep the connections between this church and the Hattori families, along with the Haymakers. Around when Steve was retiring, Holly and Steve worked very hard to get a plaque out by our Peace Meadow to tell people not just what it is, not just to mark it as a site someone could visit, but to invite them in to use the Peace Meadow as their own reflective space. The combination of the busyness of the retirement and the chaos of the shutdowns means we never got a chance to dedicate that plaque. And so we're going to do that today at the end of the service. So when it ends, we're going to invite anyone who is willing or able to go out into the Peace Meadow, and we'll have a short ceremony to dedicate the plaque. Holly, Dick, and I met a couple of weeks ago to plan out this service. And we read the words on the plaque out loud, which we will read a little bit later in the service. And realized that the plaque perfectly laid out the direction for this service. So we divided the service into 5 parts, based on what the plaque said, sort of in order. Those 5 sections are 1, the story; 2, the response. That one is about how the families in this church responded to the tragedy. 3 is the response, the section about the Peace Stones and what happened a few years later, and the name. And then 4 is the naming, and 5 is the purpose. So the service will kind of be outlined in those 5 areas: story, response, naming, purpose. And because this date fell smack in the middle of the stewardship drive, we were very hesitant for this at all to seem like a pitch for money, because it is not. While it is true that without the giving to this church in the past, it would not have been here to play the vital role that it did in this story, that is not why we are acknowledging the anniversary this month or today. So what we did is to section off the stewardship portion first, to kind of get it out of the way. And we're going to do the offering right after this, and then we will go a little more into depth, which leads into this morning's offering. Remember, we are sharing the money right down the middle with an organization that is doing good works in the church. I think I've mentioned it before. We're sharing it with the Walls Project. You can stick that image up if you want, which does amazing work in the community, and we're going to split it right down the middle for the whole month. We're halfway through, so I have no idea what we're giving. When we were shut down, we were sometimes giving $100 to an organization, or $200. Since we have opened back up, there has not been a month where we've given less than $1,000 to an organization. So that is your doing and your generosity. So I'll ask you to give very generously as this morning's offering is gratefully given and received. In 1992, Yoshi Hattori, a 16-year-old exchange student from Japan, was shot and killed when he accidentally approached the wrong house on his way to a party in Baton Rouge. In his memory, the Hattoris, the Yoshi Coalition, and Yoshi's host family, the Haymakers, have devoted their lives to increased understanding among cultures and reducing gun violence. In his memory, Toshiji Yoshida, a landscaping contractor in Konin City, Japan, made a personal gift of these stones to our city. The peace stones were dedicated in 1996 and named Fear Less and Love More. We invite you into our peace meadow. Remember, meditate, pray, gather, act, work for a nonviolent world.
Wow.
I like to be as tall as possible, so I'm Holly Haymaker, and I'm speaking today for both Dick and myself. Mine is the first part. What happened? Yoshi was our third exchange student. He arrived in Baton Rouge in August, 30 years ago. Yoshi was an ideal exchange student, friendly, energetic, full of curiosity about his new world, his beloved vision of America. At McKinley High, he was so popular that when they went to football games, the other kids in the stands would yell, "Yoshi, Yoshi." So it was not a surprise when he and Webb went to the Baton Rouge Blues Festival that they returned with an invitation to a Halloween party. It was to be in the home of another Japanese student in central Louisiana 2 weeks before Halloween. In Japan, Yoshi was a member of the rugby team. What he really wanted to do was dance. jazz dance. He was taking jazz dance classes. He dressed for the night as John Travolta. Light blue tux, ruffled shirt. He was not scary. He was also not wearing his glasses. Yoshi and our son Webb were 16 years old and wanted to go on their own. They reversed 2 numbers of the address and stopped at a house down the street that had lots of Halloween decorations. It also had a very anxious woman and a husband who had drunk some alcohol and who owned at least 7 guns. The boys knocked on the door. The woman opened the door, saw Yoshi, and slammed it shut. The boys were walking away when her husband opened the door and held out a gun. Yoshi didn't see the gun. He walked back toward the party happily, saying, "We're here for the party." The man shouted, "Freeze." Yoshi didn't understand freeze and kept walking. The man shot. At the criminal trial the next year, the man was acquitted because the jury agreed that it was his right to defend his home and that he was reasonably afraid. Yoshi's parents, Masa and Mieko Hattori, arrived in Baton Rouge 2 days after his death. The next day, at Yoshi's service in this sanctuary, Mieko stood and said she had compassion for the man who killed her son because he too was a victim of gun violence. As they flew back to Japan with Yoshi's ashes, Mieko felt Yoshi speak to her. She felt him urge her to do something about gun violence in America. Japanese political action often involves petitions. Masa, Mieko, and their wonderful group of supporters quickly drafted a petition addressed to the President of the United States, asking him to do something to reduce gun violence in America. Within weeks, they had thousands of signatures. I read this for Dick. If I sometimes say he and sometimes me, sorry. At Yoshi's service 30 years ago, Reverend Steve Crump walked to the pulpit and spoke. Guns, guns, guns. How could this not have happened here? In response, Dick joined the church. But how to respond to Yoshi's death? Once we received the Hattori petition to President Clinton, it was clear to him that what our response should be. How could we not respond with our own petition? But how do you do this? He's a physicist, not a political activist. A group of church members and others quickly joined together to help us craft our own petition. The Unitarian Universalist Association gave us a grant of $5,000. With that money and many volunteers here and at religious organizations around the country, we began to mail out petitions. Remember, this was 1992. No Facebook, no email, no other social media. We bought a lot of stamps. People came to our house and addressed envelopes. We gathered our lists of people who might help or at least sign. Over time, it became clear to Dick that we needed the help of a national organization. And he found the perfect one. He called the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, otherwise known as CSGV. It is a network, a coalition of national churches and other organizations working together to end gun violence. Their answer to his request was a resounding yes. After the criminal trial, he went to DC where they reviewed gun policy with him, and he met many legislators. And in 1993, when the Hattoris flew to DC, we joined them, and they met President Clinton in the Oval Office. The Hot Tories delivered their 2 million petitions. We delivered 150,000 petitions. Our number may be small in comparison to theirs, but it was the first mass gathering of signatures nationally and started CSGV's grassroots network of advocates. How have we responded since then? The Hot Tories won their civil suit against the man who shot Yoshi, and they gave us the money to work on gun control. So we called it Yoshi's Gift and sent it to CSGV to create small grants to help state organizations. By now, all the money's been spent, but there are still good state organizations nationally. We also joined the Hot Tories when Mieko spoke at the Million Mom March in the spring of 2000. This morning, we actually have the organizer of that march, Donna Dees. Donna Dees, would you stand up? I don't see you. There she is in the back. Thank you for that work, then and now, because she's still up at the legislature every spring. And if you want to find out, she is the best person to go to for what to do right now in Louisiana around this issue. And she's going to be around a little longer, I hope, yes. Oh, she's also looking for youth who might want to work for this issue, and might want to go speak in front of the legislature. So if you have any thoughts, she's right back there. We spent hours at the legislature. We also have been at protest gatherings. This church has hosted many events, including one with Sarah Brady, and one 10 years ago, a full-day symposium on gun violence. And now, let us take heart that President Biden signed a bipartisan bill in June that is a step in the right direction. And remember, there's always work to do. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and stand and sing this next hymn.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for that
Well, for some of us here this morning, it doesn't feel like 30 years. It feels less than that. Ohayo gozaimasu to our Japanese visitors and guests. Good morning to our more English-speaking people. Soren Kierkegaard said, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward. I reviewed this week my analog file of clippings and sermons and essays and photos, memorabilia from my trip that I would take 11 months after Yoshi's death to Japan. Today, I reflect on the sacred questions that came knocking at our door, our heart's door. Came right here. Nobody asked to do this stuff. Nobody here amongst us, no one in the congregation, nobody in town made up this stuff, but the questions came knocking at our door, and so we had to respond. And we noticed that it came really close to us, sat right beside us, because a host family and a high school and a whole community, and then we discovered our nation and another nation, which all became an international event. Yoshi's death was an international event, as news stories and poetry, dedicated songs and films and later published books and op-ed letters and campaigns to end gun violence would profoundly reveal. It is really quite a collection. I think you, Holly, and Dick gave a collection to Hill Memorial Library at LSU, so it's all there. And my file is at least this thick, plus the box of memorabilia from Japan. We know how that is. But on the Sunday morning following his death, we made, I guess it was up to me, to make the tragic announcement. Remember, the news hadn't hit the morning paper. This is Saturday night, late Saturday night. I got the word from Holly. And I was so emotionally moved by it all, and I knew we all were, and so we asked for a moment of silence. And that was kind of the beginning moment for us in worship. By Monday afternoon, Yoshi's parents had arrived in New Orleans, because it was already late Sunday by the time they received the word. Masa and Mieko heard the word and immediately got on a plane. As a memorial service was being planned not for days away, but for Tuesday evening following this event. Attended by the mayor, the police chief, and by more journalists and media trucks than I could count. And of course, Yoshi's parents, who were right over there. I'll never forget it. With their translator and members of the Japanese consulate from New Orleans. The persistent and perverse gun culture in this nation was an obvious context of this tragedy, right from the very beginning. The question, how could this not have happened here, would soon move to a question for which I still have no answer. Guns, 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 guns. When will we have enough guns? You have an answer to that question? But here's another question. How many lives do you think Jim and Sarah Brady saved in their lifetimes? Jim Brady, President Reagan's press secretary, paralyzed in the gun blast that, as we later came to realize, almost took the life of the president, a bullet coming about an inch away from his heart, having pierced a lung. It's sacred territory on which we gather, right over there, and I will never forget it. Where you all are sitting on the east wall, Sarah Brady gave a press conference here and denounced gun violence. At that time, Jim and Sarah were still members of the Republican Party. And all this work sacred territory. She denounced the easy and deadly availability of firearms in this nation, and she called for reform. How many lives did they save? The Bradys, may they rest in peace. Sacred question. I don't know the answer to that question. The Hattories and the Haymakers met in the Oval Office of the White House. And here's a question I think you can answer. Is there a doubt in your mind that the two families coming together with all those petitions gave President Clinton courage and vote counting confidence? And you got to say, President Clinton, among his attributes, vote counting was one of them. Gave him confidence to say in the State of the Union address the following January, you, Congress, if you pass the Brady Bill, and I think he used his left hand in doing it, if you pass the Brady Bill, I will sign it. They did, and he did, by November. Handgun Violence and Prevention Act, known as the Brady Bill. It's in shambles today, given the political situation in our country. But that's what he did on November 30th, 13 months after Yoshi's death. And how would you answer questions that Yoshi's classmates asked me directly through a translator when I visited Yoshi's high school, Asahigaoka High School in Nagoya, Japan? Hill of the Rising Sun is the translation of that name, Hill of the Rising Sun. This is what they asked me through their translator, and all the students knew what the question was. They were just in silence, watching my expression as I heard the question, now coming in English through translation. And here's the question they asked. Are Americans prejudiced against Japanese? And do you own a gun? These students, who are now in their late 40s, watched me carefully. Kind of think they knew the answer to the question, but they wanted to receive some honesty from me, from an American. Back home, we address sacred questions. Other tough questions. Why the attention on this one boy's death? And I have to say, local coalitions answered, and national ones that did as well. In part, I'll point to it, by displaying countless empty and worn shoes that were placed on the Capitol steps. I mean, you had to walk into a shoe or walk on a shoe if you were to go up those steps at the state capitol. It was an amazing display. Shoes of persons white or black, youthful or old, rich or poor. Is this too strong a statement? I'll say it. Gun violence is a hideous leveler, and it's an American disease. Japan and Yoshi's well-meaning parents sent a young ambassador, an AFS student, 2,600 miles and 14 time zones away for an intended year to a country whose parents never visited until 2 days after he was killed. And that was not the end of their visits. That was not the end of the story of persistence and endeavor and friendship building that lasts a lifetime. And it certainly wasn't the end of their story, nor is the end of ours. Baton Rouge received, for example, an unsolicited gift from a landscaper, Toshiji Yoshida of Konan City, Japan, a gift of 2 magnificent boulders. But they were given to Baton Rouge. And the downtown location was artistically and earnestly proposed within walking distance of the Centroplex. But how does one answer angry letters to the editor denouncing such a display, inasmuch as it was year 1995, do the arithmetic, 50 years after the ending of the war in the Pacific. A venue across from the USS Kidd. Too much to confront, no matter how one tried to persuade others that time passes and it's time to put prejudices aside. And so another sacred question came knocking at our door. Will the Unitarian Church receive these stones? The congregation voted to receive them, and we dedicated them in 1996. First placing them there, and then when we rebuilt the parking lot, we lifted up sacred soil and relocated them for a peace medal. And we dedicate the plaque today at the entrance of that medal. But we do so in the current context of American life, where in East Baton Rouge Parish, we logged the 85th homicide this week. And in our nation, the 25th mass shooting in this year alone for those statistics. So it's not your imagination. There is more than one mass shooting every other week in our nation. So if we go 2 weeks without a mass shooting, we make up the next week. The Peace Medal incorporated significant drainage with solid but invisible footings. The engineers around here appreciate that, to support those stones, also known as fear less and love more. They may speak to you as you pass by, as you sit for reflection and meditation or prayer, or where you sit at a lunch meeting to decide how you and your friend will help to repair the world, right? And for several of our families, we have scattered the cremains of their loved ones in the meadow. And for brand new arrivals who wonder sometimes about placing of the peace stones, remember, out of the huge stones which we received and then held and dedicated on our outdoor lot, the worship team over the years decided to connect something liturgically. So we have small stones into the chalice bowl we place, which is, who knows what it is, because we don't ask people what it means when they do this silently. But it's an inner and silent reflection. Maybe it's a personal or private vow. Maybe it's thought about a family member or a friend, or maybe it's something about the self. Maybe it's about some endeavor, but it's a small stone, something of substance for participation and connection. So we connect the outside with the inside, and the inside with the inside collectively. You see how that works? Actually, it's quite beautiful. And it came out of teamwork. Today we say thanks to a family on this chancel today, represented by Holly and Dick. And we say thanks to a family in Nagoya who know about this service and will hear of it. Mieko and Masa, Hattori's and their family, for their everlasting friendship, their trust in a better life for us in this nation. And we say thanks to all the coalitions and to a congregation that witnessed all of this good work, and helped to repair a part of the world. Domo arigato. Thank you very much.
invite you into a moment of prayer and reflection. The God that we know when we see love and justice and hope and comfort, the great mystery named and unnamed, be with us on this day. And hold these families, not just the Hattorias and the Haymakers, but everyone who has lost someone to violence, not just of guns. Everyone who has lost their way or lost their hope or lost their sense of being. Help us to know that there is a path to make this world better and that we can help be a part of its healing. Please soften our hearts so that we can be more kind and more open to those who need it. Amen.
The Hattori family wrote a letter because they like contributing and staying in connection with the community here at the church. Dear everyone, thank you for hosting the 30th anniversary ceremony for Yoshi in the Unitarian Church. Thanks to many people in Louisiana, my son's dream of making America his second country has come true. The Haymaker family has always been with us with incredible empathy for these long years. The Unitarian Church had the Mass for Yoshi after his death and accepted the best places to put the peace stones, pictures, and cranes for Yoshi's remembrance. 71 students and teachers from Louisiana and Japan have visited each other under the Japan-Louisiana Friendship Fund. The world has so many problems for us to solve, but we all have abilities to develop our world for the better, as many historical stories tell us. Let's work together with hope, courage, and joy. Finally, let us introduce the words one special young man left. When I reflect on Yoshi's death, and what a tremendous loss to the world, I feel there is no role for gun ownership in the modern democratic society. Our gun tragedies enrage me. I hope that one day the United States could live up to its ideals. Thank you, Masich and Miyako Hattori, Yoshi's parents.
Like I said, after this service, I invite you to come and be a part of the dedication. But why a plaque for 30th anniversary? At the 20th anniversary, we had a weekend-long conference on ending gun violence. Why just a plaque? Because there is something powerful in naming what happens. This story has all but faded from the American narrative. We have media here who flew in from Japan. And unless someone from the Advocate is here and I don't see them, we don't have someone who even came a few blocks to come here. Not naming, and it is still a story in Japan because in Japan they still make it a story. It is not a story here because we have stopped naming it. And when we don't name it, it allows other traumas to also continue to happen because we don't name them as well. The more that we don't name, the more that we allow to keep happening. So dedicating a plaque is, yes, just dedicating a plaque. And it's also naming something that is important. And it is true that in the scope of what we have been through as a people these last 30 years, this is one of just many acts of violence. And it becomes exhausting to list all of them. And yet everyone who has died from violence, and everyone who has died in any way, deserves to have their name remembered. Response. This is the last part of the plaque. Unitarian Universalist minister Kate Braystrup, she's a chaplain in the Maine Wildlife and Fisheries Service. And she says she never looks for God in the incident or in the accident. She looks for God in the response. Not where was God in the violence, but where was God when people showed up. That was the evidence. Not where was God the time that you were at your lowest, but who is there to bring you out of it so that you are with us today? That is the theological question that I see we have to struggle with. And when I meet with church members right now, it's actually pretty rough. It is my job as the purveyor of hope. Because when I sit down with someone, I say, things are going to probably get a lot worse. Because it feels like a lot of the progress we've made over the last 30 years have eroded, at best. The way that we are coping with the pandemic and the unraveling that is happening and the violence that is happening because of that unraveling is significant. The Supreme Court, fresh off of removing the right for women to decide whether or not they can do things that are within God's realm with their bodies, that Supreme Court is now, normally they take a year off to let the culture recover when they make a major decision. They are, unless I'm reading things wrong, primed to take away the rights of many black people to have representation in this country. Because they're saying that racism is over. The climate, which we are in a state to feel louder, more frequently, and more dramatically, is getting worse. I don't see any relief coming from the Saints or LSU anytime soon. So all of this is to say, when I sit down with a church member and I try to tell them, hold on, because it's going to... And also remember, by the year, I think 2035, they said 70% of the Senate is going to represent 35% of the population. The state of this world is going to get hard. And we as a church have to be prepared for it. I don't know the climate in Japan, so for those who are visiting from Japan, please stick with me on this for a minute. We are in May right now, not calendar-wise, but we are in May right now, and we know it's about to get miserable for the next 4 or 5 months here. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through it, and we're going to have brighter days ahead of us. But we have to know we have to name what we are going through. So I actually turned to Holly and Dick for advice on where they see hope in all this. And they said 2 things. One is everything that we do or could do makes the world better, makes this tragedy less likely to happen again. And as it relates to the church, they said the first thing we need to do is to actually have a place for people to be welcomed. This is reflected right on the plaque. Name, meditate, pray.
Work for peace.
That's the last part. Gather, act, work for a nonviolent world. Thank you. See, it was the congregation who got this. But first, be welcoming to all people who need to be in this place, who need this place, I should say. 2, create the environment for people to be grounded within themselves, or to do the work they need to do, either with their God or their spirit or whatever that thing is. And then 3, go out into the world and make it better in some way. The old Universalists, they had this idea that none are saved until all are saved. The world is going to be saved. The world is going to be okay. It's just whether we are going to be the people who help it get there sooner or whether we slow it down. Go make the world better. Amen. Let's sing. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard and the path is never clear. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone.